Not porn. It's not porn.
I'm sorry. I'm trying my best, damn it. I just couldn't do it. I'm sorry.
Word up, Yoshi-Sor Munchakupas is my name, and I'ma tell you how I beat the IRS at their own game.
2023 has been a rather underwhelming year for game controversies. There were a few interesting ones, I won't lie, and the year's not over, so anything could change that, but...
I lied on my tax forms cause I just don't
Alright, hold on, I gotta take this. Hello? What? Oh. No kidding. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Good luck. Okay, well, I have just been informed by every person who lost their job thanks to those goddamn never-ending layoffs that everything's fine, and we can just continue on to today's actual topic. This is what I get for trying to write this shit out ahead of time. In any case, we'll save further thoughts on that and other events for the year-end video. But friends, I am still contractually obligated with myself to dedicate at least one current year controversy to a full video per season. And boy, do I have the perfect candidate for that. It's an oddity to be sure, and has likely been forgotten by this point. Hell, I don't even know if I would call this a controversy, it's more like a perplexiversy. But I think confusion and anger go hand in hand, and this is frankly one of those more interesting controversies from this year. Yes, I am making the boldest of claims that the dating sim that does your taxes was a bright spot in a year of dull and miserable game controversies, and I ain't gonna back down from that. And just when I thought we were done with these dang Bishoujo games. Oh yeah, shout out to that 16-bit show for mentioning Sayori too. But enough clamoring about the anime game that does your taxes, let's talk about the anime game that does your taxes, aka Tax Heaven 3000. Tax Heaven 3000 was announced for Steam towards the end of March 2023, while being developed and published by a small team who call themselves MSCHF. No, I don't know why it's spelled like that, and their only other game on the site was the coveted Chair Simulator.
Okay, boomer.
Like I said, coveted. Anywho, Tax Heaven posited itself as a romantic visual novel where a young tax-obsessed lady named Iris helps you with your current year federal income tax return, and was set to be released soon after its announcement. And I'm so used to doing all these big build-ups by now, it's very weird when I don't have to do that for once. Like, seriously, Tax Heaven just plopped into the zeitgeist out of nowhere, and despite the concept being a rather absurd one, you can even say it seemed to be like a parody of some kind. The instant reactions I saw to this announcement were as follows.
Look out, Internet! There be a scam on the horizon! The anime girl asking for your social security number and your credit card details is real! Watch out!
Other folks theorized that this was more likely an April Fool's joke, kinda like Hateful Boyfriend was. And that would certainly lend more credence to the parody angle, but before any further conspiracies could start spreading, the game's Steam page was removed about as quickly it took for the backlash to start happening. MSCHF expected this reaction though, as well as the mountain of coverage from both the gaming press and the general news press, so one of their reps released a statement that insisted the game wasn't a scam, as it could be played without an internet connection and, quote, is probably safer than most big box software. What a peculiar statement. I wonder if we're going to be seeing anything else like that pop up. Despite that setback, Tax Heaven was not to be deaded, as MSCHF would simply release it on the long-running indie game hosting site itch.io barely a week after the Steam page removal. So I don't know about y'all, but I get a strong feeling that there's more to this game than that title would imply, and I finally feel like doing my taxes for once in my life, so let's see how exactly Iris can help us here. The game starts out with you, yes, you, a classic nondescript protagonist who just moved into this hot new town. After you give yourself a name, you head out to the local area to see some local sites and end up bumping into the local tax waifu. So far, so typical, and our first conversation with Iris sees her asking the standard questions any random person we just met would ask, like, are we a US resident? Do we have a green card, and how many years have we been in the US? Again, typical stuff, and from there, we're thrust into a wacky relationship with her that involves coffee dates, library dates, office printer troubleshooting dates, uncensored handholding, and of course, a barrage of tax-related questions that go towards the PDF file you receive once you successfully seduce her. And yeah, that's about it. But not before you get to fuck her brains out. I'm not going to be so stubborn as to harshly judge Tax Heaven by the standards of the genre it is lampooning, but it is a basic-ass rent-p-made dating sim with less substance than the endless ones we've referenced in the last video, and even stuff you'd find on Newgrounds. Anyone remember Pike of Date? Like with those games though, it is free, so we really don't have to go much further in that territory. So with that out of the way, how does it work as a parody of the dating sim genre? Well, I'd say it does the job sufficiently. It's got the art style and generic music down pat, and it's worth pointing out that it will stop you from proceeding if you answer any of Iris's questions in a way that indicates you're not single, you have any kids whatsoever, or you're not a US resident. Obviously, you don't have to answer honestly if you want to see where the game goes, but considering the target demographic these games are usually aimed at, it makes sense to limit it in that manner. And the parody doesn't just end with the game itself, there's a whole ass website to go along with it. You can really tell they took one look at Manga Gamer and wanted to remake it in a way to, well, keep in with the parody and also not make it run like shit. But they went the extra mile by way of these links here that lead to some short stories explaining Iris's surprisingly complicated backstory. The biggest treat of all, though, has to be the $90 special edition of the game, which includes a physical copy, or an installation disc to use the correct term, an instruction manual, and an Iris Dakimakura. It's been sold out for a good bit now, but you can still find marked up copies on eBay and elsewhere if you're really hankering for that. And it's the best indication that these fellas know exactly what they're doing. Now, the parody elements are all well and good, but a playthrough of the game made it abundantly clear that MSCHF weren't joking around when they say the game actually helps you prepare for your current year tax return. With that in mind, we must consider how it fares in that respect, and this is where the real limitations start showing. MSCHF didn't leave out dependents and joint returns just to keep in theme with the parody. In case you didn't know, folks, tax returns can be very complicated. In Tax Heaven, you get to file a basic 1040 return, and it does process and calculate data from your standard employer-provided W-2 income form, as well as some unemployment forms, social security forms for any of the elderly or disabled dating sim players, the real heroes in my opinion, and you can even include some IRA or 401k contributions. However, once you've romanced Iris and have completed your return, the game then expects you to mail it directly to the IRS. Just like the MSCHF rep said, it doesn't connect online. But there's a reason why so many people like doing their returns online. And it doesn't help that there's no way for the game to check for mistakes or to even file an amended return, so that kinda cripples the reliability right off the bat. And even with these bare essentials, the game has quite a few glaring omissions. State returns being perhaps the biggest example of this, but for my reported W-2 income, the biggest one has to be the self-employed income forms for any freelancers or contractors out there. I say this at the risk of stereotyping, a decent chunk of these fellows would likely fall into that target demographic, wouldn't they? I can't really blame MSCHF since I'm not sure how much RenP could handle making the necessary calculations for those forms, but suffice to say, this probably isn't the best way to file your taxes. That could change if MSCHF remain committed to the bit and release an updated version for next year's tax season, but for now, you're honestly better off doing this stuff yourself. Or better yet, going to an accredited tax assistant to do this stuff. Or better yet, getting your return processed and filed with trusted sites like TurboTax and H&R Block, who do all that menial work for you at no cost whatsoever. And herein lies the final piece to this rather taxing puzzle. Well, at least I'm not being bombarded with tomatoes. So far, we have been examining Tax Heaven 3000 as the tax software dating sim hybrid it's presented itself to be, but those aspects aren't quite the core of its true purpose. If anyone out there thought that offhanded dig against tax return software was an anomaly, allow me to dissuade that. As partway into the game, amidst the 50th tax-related conversation you had with Iris, she makes a comment about TurboTax, the most popular tax return software on the market. Don't get involved with them. They're dangerous. How curious. And the further that one explores the admittedly small number of paths in the game, the likelier you'll run into certain characters who also espouse those sentiments. It's fishy for an industry to build itself up specifically around gaining a public branch of the government. And once more, it doesn't just end with the game either, as the website details another character with the oh-so-subtle name of Turbo, who's described as being up to no good. I didn't encounter them while playing the game, so I can't be 100% sure if they play a role there, but they sure as hell do in those stories I mentioned earlier. And perhaps the most baffling part of this entire thing, it turns out that Iris was created by Turbo, or TurboTax Corporation, whatever you want to call them, then supposedly became self-aware, and while fighting against them in the name of all that is well and good, was recaptured and reprogrammed to do their bidding. And any eagle eyes may have already noticed the real kicker in displaying this stringent attitude towards TurboTax via the game's own description on the itch.io page or the manifesto section on the website. Something tells me that MSCHF are not fans of these tax prep companies. And looking into their reasoning and some historical context, it's not unwarranted. I'm gonna repeat myself again. Tax returns can be very complicated. At the very least, like with many other countries, we Americans can have these returns filed for free. But unlike other countries that have their own governmental programs offering these return services, a lot of American citizens tend to pay in some manner to have those returns processed and filed. Oh, don't misunderstand me, the IRS does have a free file program for qualified applicants, and like I stated earlier, one could simply forego all of that and do their own calculations. Well, that shit requires a heavy chunk of math and patience and pain, and let's just get to the bottom line. The US tax system in general is a gigantic mess. As such, companies like Intuit, the makers of TurboTax, have proudly taken advantage of this confusion to, in one breath, make filing taxes a simple process with their quirky little software, and in another breath, make billions off of their users, especially low-income users, in what should be a free and simple process. This also isn't to say they haven't offered free returns in general. In fact, for the longest time, they and other large tax prep companies were partnered with the IRS to offer a free return as an option in their software, but they did their damnedest to hide that option and mislead consumers into thinking they had no choice but to pay some kind of fee to process all this shit. Or, tax heaven forbid, buy the full software. And if y'all think I'm pulling this out of my conspiratorial ass, this is directly referenced from a 2019 ProPublica report that not only revealed these findings to the nation, but resulted in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and those fucks removing themselves from the free file program, likely out of spite. Oh, and guess who's been lobbying against the IRS all this time to prevent a free program similar to ones in other countries from being developed, and has been failing pretty hard in recent times now that the IRS is set to do that at some point next year. Now, personally, I've never used TurboTax, so I've never had that problem. But I did have it with H&R Block when they started doing the exact same shit with limiting the tax forms they'd accept without paying a fee to process them, so fuck them too. Call me crazy, but I'm not a fan of having to pay someone to get the IRS to give me the money they owe me. It's a little dumb.
But even, you're just paying them for the services that they're offering. That's just how the free market works. You fucking commie.
Yeah, tell that to the people who are paying them these fees that were about the equivalent of what they would be getting in their return. Or hell, just lumped into what they owe to the IRS. I bet they don't even do their own taxes. But the best part of all of this is that the game levied enough buzz to provoke a response from Intuit. in what can be more or less summed up as, their statement rejected the idea of them being predatory and mentioned how they still do offer free tax returns and have in fact been working towards simplifying that tax code for years. A little bit of a do as I say, not as I do approach if you ask me. We can continue talking about this all day, but by now it's clear that MSCHF has created something that doesn't completely fall into really any of the categories that could be applied to it. Rather, it feels more akin to an art piece that purposely incorporates those formats to make a specific point. And that point involves MSCHF asking everyone, especially those who reacted to the game by calling it a scam, would you rather trust the cute anime girl who's asking for your social security number to do your taxes? Or the long-running tax return program that also processes your income with an attractive-looking UI and tries to upsell you on all the extra bits? Hell, is there really any purpose to making this process visually appealing if it's not going to be 100% accurate with the return, or just nickel and dime the customer? There's definitely an argument to be made as to whether or not MSCHF were successful in the point they were trying to prove here, but the fact they got into it to provide a response of any kind probably says the most. Which ultimately begs the question, who the hell is MSCHF? Well, I don't think it'll be a surprise to any of y'all that game development is not MSCHF's primary field. They are an art collective based in New York City that have been making various oddball works and products for the past few years, much of it with the same kind of humor and parodic elements seen in Tax Heaven. Their very first piece was this laptop that contained 6 different types of viruses that had previously caused billions of dollars in financial damages. And just like anyone would likely do with any valuable piece of art, it was sold in an auction for over $1 million. Earlier works also include a browser plugin that lets you watch Netflix while making it seem you're on a conference call, a collection of email chains from boomers,
Okay, boomer.
a feet pick AI bot that also examines the fascination behind that fetish, and a number of purchasable products that, like with the special edition of Tax Heaven, have long since sold out. In fact, those in the know will probably remember MSCHF most for 2 different kinds of shoes they've created. First was the collaborative effort they made with meme rapper turned LGBT icon Lil Nas X that resulted in the Satan shoes, and they both got in a lot of trouble with specific demographics, as well as Nike, who didn't like seeing their Air Maxes get infused with the devil's blood. The other footwear was a more recent venture, and probably the more recognizable one, the big red boots. You know, those impractical Pac-Man looking ass shoes that went viral earlier this year? Yeah, they made them.
I mean, you don't even look like you have legs.
And while most of these items do have some sort of weird artistic point to make or question to pose, again, like it did with Tax Heaven, you know what these things remind me of most? Y'all are familiar with You Don't Know Jack, right? The very Midwestern comedic trivia game from Jellyvision, aka Jackbox Games? Well, the series has had a running segment there called The Wrong Answer of the Game. It shows a sponsor of some kind that's also a bit of a hint towards one of the several wrong answers for that episode, and if you manage to find it and choose it as your answer, you get a score bonus and a prize from that sponsor. A very humorous and mostly impractical prize. Well, MSCHF's creations are like if Jellyfish went and made actual products based on these joke ones, and then sold them to our faces. Which, well, with all the money they have from those Jackbox games, they could probably do that by now if they so choose. Finally, I can give my future dependent some whiny wine.
Whiny wine, whiny wine, wine that's just for kids.
So there you have it. As I predicted, there was a fair bit going on underneath the goofy novelty of a tax return waifu sim. I'm not sure how well Tax Heaven 3000 will be remembered beyond the initial reaction, it being taken off Steam, and the media coverage that followed, and I'm not sure how many are going to take MSCHF's message seriously, even if the sentiment is popular elsewhere, but it's still a hell of a controversy. Those New Yorkers sure know how to market their art to a science and provoke the exact kind of responses they want to provoke, all while making a fair bit of money to continue making that art in the capitalistic hellhole we all occupy. Maybe we'll see Iris return in their work someday, but well, they've given us more than enough to chew on, and this is a lot of fun to talk about. Yet we can't end it quite here. Keeping in theme with the dating sim parody, the game's website also links to an X-rated patch, much like how a fair bit of other modern dating sims or adult visual novels do. Clicking on it a few times can lead to different results, such as being directed to the aforementioned origin stories, but one such scenario can send you to a rather bare HTML page that contains a completely separate story called The Bofa Encounter. Now, when I saw this the first time, I immediately punched my computer monitor and I had to get a new one, but god damn it, curiosity got the better of me. And if you want to know where the X-rated aspect gets fulfilled, it's right here. It is a shockingly explicit story, or lemon to use the correct term, where Iris meets up with a tax consultant at the IRS headquarters with the goal of learning about US tax credits and the like, and ends up getting the absolute shit fucked out of her. Consensually. A couple thoughts here. One, is this canon? Did this take place before or after the game's events? Like, I'm not super duper concerned with it or anything, but I just want to know if they were trying to shove in any more fetishes here. God, they really did think of everything, huh? Secondly, I know it's, again, keeping in theme with a parody, but I'm not exactly sure what the point is. Maybe MSCHF is saying, rather than dealing with turbotax fucking you over in a figurative sense, you should let the IRS fuck you over in a literal sense. But, you know, maybe I'm just reading into it this much, because lastly, you all know what this means, right?
Porn!